Helena Jacobson stood at the window of the one-room schoolhouse in Manassas, Colorado, watching the dust devils swirl across the empty street, and wondered if being alone forever might actually be easier than enduring another pitying glance from the married women at church. The year was 1884, and she had been teaching in this small town for 3 years now. At 24 years old, she was considered well past the prime age for marriage in these parts, where most girls were wed by 18 or 19. It was not that Helena was unpleasant to look at. She had warm brown eyes and thick auburn hair that she kept pinned in a sensible bun. Her figure was trim, her posture excellent, and her features, while not striking, were pleasing enough. The problem, as she had come to understand through whispered conversations she was not meant to overhear, was that she was too educated, too opinionated, and too quick to correct a man's grammar or historical inaccuracies. The men of Manassas had learned to keep their distance. Tom Miller had tried courting her 2 years ago, only to have her point out during their second outing that his views on westward expansion completely ignored the displacement of native peoples. He had not called again. Samuel Brennan had lasted 3 weeks before she had corrected his pronunciation of library, one too many times. After that, the invitations to socials and barn dances had dried up entirely. Helena told herself she did not mind. She had her students, her books, and a comfortable room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. She had purpose and independence. But on nights like this, when the wind howled across the San Luis Valley and rattled her windows, she felt the weight of her solitude like a physical thing pressing against her chest. She was straightening the desks for the next day when Mrs. Patterson knocked on the schoolhouse door, her round face flushed with excitement. "Miss Jacobson, a letter came for you on the afternoon stage, from Wyoming Territory." Helena's heart did an unexpected flutter. She knew no one in Wyoming Territory. She took the envelope from Mrs. Patterson's outstretched hand, noting the careful, masculine script that spelled out her name and address. "Well, open it," Mrs. Patterson urged, her curiosity barely contained. "In private, if you do not mind, Mrs. Patterson," Helena said gently but firmly. The older woman's face fell slightly, but she nodded and bustled out, leaving Helena alone with the mysterious letter. She sat at her desk and carefully broke the seal, unfolding the single sheet of paper within. The letter read, "Dear Miss Jacobson, you do not know me, and I hope you will forgive the liberty I take in writing to you. My name is Lucas Thorne, and I am a ranch hand on the Double Bar J Ranch near Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory. My friend Charlie Patterson, whose aunt you lodge with in Manassas, has spoken of you often. He mentioned that you are a woman of considerable learning and strong character, and that you value honesty and plain speaking above empty flattery. I am 26 years old and have been working cattle since I was 14. I can read and write, though I make no claims to eloquence. I own little more than my horse, my saddle, and my reputation as a man who keeps his word. What I do have is a small piece of land. 80 acres I have been saving for over the past 8 years, with good water and grass enough for a modest herd. I also have a dream of building something lasting, something that will outlive me. I am not a man given to pretty speeches or romantic gestures. I cannot offer you ease or luxury. What I can offer is respect, partnership, and a willingness to build a life together based on honest work and mutual regard. Charlie tells me you are a woman no man has had the courage to truly see. Perhaps that is because they were boys looking for someone to make them comfortable, rather than men looking for someone to make them better. I would like to know you, Miss Jacobson. If you are willing, I would be grateful if you would write back to me. If you are not interested, I will understand and will not trouble you further. Respectfully yours, Lucas Thorne. Helena read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling slightly by the third reading. It was unlike anything she had expected. There was no false poetry, no exaggerated compliments, no promises of riches or ease. Just plain, honest words from a man who seemed to understand exactly who she was and was not frightened by it. She sat at her desk long after the sun had set, composing and recomposing her response in her mind. Finally, she pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. Dear Mr. Thorne, your letter surprised me greatly. I am not accustomed to being seen, as you put it, rather than merely looked at. Your honesty is refreshing, and I find myself compelled to respond with equal candor. I am indeed a woman of strong opinions and considerable education. I have opinions on politics, literature, and social justice that many men find off-putting. I believe women should have the right to vote. I believe the treatment of Native peoples by the United States government is morally reprehensible. I believe that education is the foundation of all progress. If these views trouble you, it is better we discover it now. I am also practical. I understand hard work. I grew up on a farm in Ohio before my parents died of typhoid when I was 16. I put myself through normal school by working as a housekeeper and taking in mending. I am not afraid of difficulty. What I am afraid of is a life half-lived, surrounded by people who wish I were someone else. If you truly want to know me as I am, then I am willing to correspond with you and see what we might discover. Yours sincerely, Helena Jacobson. She posted the letter the next morning, and for the following 2 weeks, she found herself distracted during lessons, constantly calculating how long it would take for her letter to reach Wyoming territory and for his response to return. When his second letter arrived, she took it to her room before opening it, wanting complete privacy this time. Dear Helena, I hope I may call you that, as I would like you to call me Lucas. The views you express do not trouble me in the slightest. In fact, they confirm what Charlie told me about your character. I have seen firsthand how the government treats the Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples, and it turns my stomach. I have worked alongside women who could rope and brand as well as any man, and I see no reason they should not have a say in how they are governed. As for a life half-lived, I understand that fear. I have spent years working for other men's dreams, saving every dollar I could, waiting until I had enough to start something of my own. I am ready now, but I find I do not want to build this life alone. I want someone who will challenge me, who will point out when I am wrong, who will make me think harder and be better. Tell me about your students. Tell me what books you love. Tell me what makes you angry and what makes you laugh. I want to know the small things as well as the large ones. I will tell you this about myself. I was born in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children. My father drank and my mother worked herself to an early grave trying to hold the family together. I left home at 14 because there were too many mouths to feed and I was big enough to work. I have been on my own since then, moving from ranch to ranch, learning everything I could about cattle, horses, and land management. I do not drink spirits, as I saw what it did to my father. I attend church when I can, though I confess my faith is more in the natural world than in doctrine. I have been in a handful of fights, all of which I tried to avoid, and I have never drawn my gun on another man except to protect livestock from predators. I am not perfect, Helena. I have a temper that I work hard to control. I am stubborn. I sometimes push myself and others too hard. But I am honest, and I am loyal, and I am willing to learn. Please write back soon. I find myself waiting for the stage each day with an eagerness I have not felt in years. Yours, Lucas. Thus began a correspondence that lasted through the spring and into the summer of 1884. They wrote to each other twice a week, sometimes more. Helena found herself sharing things she had never told another soul. She wrote about the loneliness of being different, about her love of Shakespeare and Whitman, about her frustration with the limited opportunities available to women, about her secret fear that she was too difficult to love. Lucas wrote about his dreams for his ranch, about the beauty of the Wyoming grasslands, about books he was struggling through to improve his education, about his own fear that he was too rough and unpolished for a woman like her. As the months passed, Helena realized she was falling in love with a man she had never met. She loved his honesty, his thoughtfulness, his willingness to admit weakness. She loved that he asked her opinion on everything from cattle breeds to poetry. She loved that he never once suggested she should soften her views to be more palatable. In late August, Lucas's letter contained a question that made her heart race. "Helena, I cannot continue this way much longer. I need to see you, to hear your voice, to know if what I feel through these letters is real when we stand face to face. Would you be willing to allow me to visit Manassas? I can come in September when the worst of the ranch work is finished. If after meeting me you find I'm not what you hoped, I will leave and not trouble you further. But if there is a chance, even a small one, that you might feel for me what I feel for you, then I must take it. Please say yes." Helena's hand shook as she penned her reply. "Yes. Come in September. I am terrified and hopeful in equal measure. I will meet you at the stage stop on the 15th of the month." Helena, the weeks until September 15th were the longest of Helena's life. She found herself constantly distracted, snapping at students who did not deserve it, lying awake at night wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. What if he took one look at her and was disappointed? What if she had built him up in her mind into something he could never be? What if the connection they had forged through words vanished when confronted with reality? Mrs. Patterson noticed her agitation and finally cornered her one evening after supper. "My nephew Charlie received a letter from his friend Mr. Thorne," she said, her eyes twinkling. "It seems the young man is quite taken with you." Helena felt her cheeks burn. "We have been corresponding," she admitted, "and he is coming to visit on the 15th. Mrs. Patterson reached over and squeezed Helena's hand. "Charlie says Lucas Thorne is one of the finest men he has ever known. Honest, hardworking, and decent. He also says the man is half out of his mind with nerves about meeting you." "Is he really?" Helena asked, feeling oddly comforted by this information. "Really and truly. Charlie says Lucas has read your letters so many times the pages are wearing thin, and he has been impossible to work with for weeks, too distracted to focus properly." Helena laughed despite her nerves. "I have been much the same. Then I suspect you two are well matched, Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. The morning of September 15th dawned clear and bright, the Colorado sky that particular shade of blue that seemed impossibly deep. Helena dressed with care in her best dress, a deep green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up, then took it down, then pinned it up again, finally leaving a few soft curls loose around her face. She arrived at the stage stop a full hour early, too nervous to wait at the boarding house. She sat on the bench outside the depot, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from trembling. When the stage finally rounded the bend in the road, Helena stood, her heart hammering so hard she felt lightheaded. The stage pulled to a stop in a cloud of dust, and several passengers began to disembark. 2 older women, a man in a business suit, a family with 3 small children, and then, finally, a tall man in worn denim and a dusty hat. He stepped down from the stage and looked around, and Helena knew immediately it was Lucas. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the sun-weathered skin of a man who spent his life outdoors. His hair, dark brown and slightly too long, curled at the collar of his shirt. But it was his eyes that caught her. Even from a distance, she could see they were a startling blue-gray, and they were scanning the street with an intensity that made her breath catch. When his gaze found her, he went completely still. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the dusty street. Then he removed his hat and walked toward her, his stride purposeful but unhurried. "Miss Jacobson," he asked when he stood before her, his voice deeper than she had imagined. "Mr. Thorne," she replied, pleased that her voice did not shake. "Helena," he said softly, almost reverently, "you are even lovelier than I imagined." She smiled. "And you are more nervous than your letters led me to believe you would be," he laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "You have found me out. I am terrified, if I am being honest." "As am I," she admitted. "Shall we walk? I thought I might show you the town such as it is." "I would like that very much." They walked through Manassas, and Helena found to her relief that the ease they had found in their letters translated remarkably well to conversation. Lucas asked intelligent questions about the town, the school, and her students. She asked about his journey and his ranch. They fell into a natural rhythm, their words flowing as freely as they had on paper. As they walked past the church, they encountered Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Smith, two of the town's most prominent gossips. Both women's eyes widened when they saw Helena walking with a strange man. "Miss Jacobson," Mrs. Henderson said, barely concealing her curiosity. "Who is your friend?" "This is Mr. Lucas Thorne of Wyoming Territory," Helena said. "He is visiting for a few days. Lucas, this is Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Smith." "Ladies," Lucas said, tipping his hat politely. "Are you relations?" Mrs. Smith asked boldly. "Not yet," Lucas said, and Helena felt her cheeks warm at the implication. The two women looked at each other significantly, and Helena knew that by evening the entire town would know she had a gentleman caller. Lucas stayed at the boarding house for 5 days, and they spent every possible moment together. He attended her classes, sitting quietly in the back and watching her teach with an expression of such admiration that it made her self-conscious. They took long walks in the evenings, talking until the stars came out. They sat on Mrs. Patterson's porch, sharing comfortable silences broken by shared observations about the people passing by. On the 3rd day, they took a buggy out to see the mountains, which rose dramatically to the west of the valley. They stopped by a creek to let the horse rest, and Lucas finally voiced what had been building between them since he arrived. "Helena, I do not want to leave on Saturday," he said, taking her hand in his. His hands were calloused and strong, but his touch was gentle. "These past 3 days have been the happiest of my life. I know it is fast, perhaps too fast, but I am more certain now than I have ever been of anything. I love you. I love your mind, your passion, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you challenge me and the way you laugh at my poor attempts at humor. I love everything about you, and I cannot imagine going back to Wyoming without you." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "Lucas, I feel the same, but I have responsibilities here. My students, my contract with the school board." "I know," he said quickly. "I am not asking you to abandon anything. The term ends in December, does it not? Finish out your contract. Let me return to Wyoming and prepare the ranch house, make it ready for you. Then, if you are willing, come to me as my wife. We will build our life together, and you can teach there if you wish. We can build a school on the ranch if need be. I just want you with me, Helena. However we need to make that happen, we will find a way. You would do that. Help me establish a school. I would do anything for you," he said simply. "Do you not know that by now?" Helena reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble of his jaw under her fingertips. I love you, Lucas Thorne. Yes, yes, I will come to you in December. Yes, I will marry you." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding and pulled her into his arms. Their first kiss was tentative and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I do not have a ring yet," Lucas said. "I wanted to wait until I knew for certain you would say yes." "I do not need a ring," Helena said. "I just need you." "You will have one anyway," he promised. "The best I can afford." They returned to town glowing with happiness, and Lucas went directly to the telegraph office to send word to Charlie Patterson and the ranch foreman that he would need extra help through December, as he was preparing to bring a wife home. That evening, they sat with Mrs. Patterson and formally asked her to witness their engagement. The older woman cried happy tears and insisted on hosting a small dinner party to celebrate. The remaining 2 days of Lucas's visit passed far too quickly. They made plans and dreamed out loud about their future. Lucas described his land to her in such detail she could almost see it. He told her about the house he would build, modest but solid, with room to grow. He promised her a library of her own, a place where she could keep all her beloved books. He talked about the children they might have someday, and how they would raise them to be curious and kind. Helena told him about the kind of school she wanted to create, one that would serve not just the children of wealthy ranchers but anyone who wanted to learn. She described lessons she dreamed of teaching and books she wanted her students to read. Lucas listened to it all with rapt attention, asking questions and offering suggestions. On Saturday morning, they said their goodbyes at the stage stop. The town had gathered to see Lucas off, curious about the man who had won their spinster schoolteacher's heart. Lucas held Helena's hands and looked into her eyes. 3 months, he said. "I will have everything ready. You finish your obligations here and then you come to me. Can you do that?" "I can," she promised. "I will be on the first stage after the term ends." "I will meet you in Cheyenne," he said. "We will be married there and go home together." He kissed her once more, chastely, mindful of their audience. Then he boarded the stage and was gone, leaving Helena standing in the dust, already aching with missing him. The 3 months that followed were both interminable and impossibly swift. Helena threw herself into her teaching with renewed energy, determined to leave her students with the best education she could provide in the time remaining. She wrote to Lucas every other day, and his replies came with the same frequency. They were already planning every detail of their life together, from the layout of the house to the names they might give their children someday. The town's attitude toward Helena shifted dramatically after Lucas's visit. The women who had pitied her now envied her. The men who had dismissed her now regarded her with new respect, as if Lucas's love had somehow validated her worth. Helena found this both amusing and irritating, but she was too happy to let it bother her much. In November, a package arrived from Lucas containing a simple gold band with a small diamond set in it. The accompanying note read, "This was my mother's ring, the only thing of value my father never managed to sell or trade for whiskey. She gave it to me before she died and made me promise to give it only to a woman I loved with my whole heart. It belongs to you now, as I do. I am counting the days until December. The house is nearly finished. I think you will like it. I have built you a bookshelf that covers an entire wall of the main room. Charlie says I am obsessed, but I want everything to be perfect for you. I love you more with each passing day, which I would not have thought possible. Yours always." Lucas. Helena cried when she read the note, touched beyond words by the gift of his mother's ring. She wore it on a chain around her neck, close to her heart, until they could be married and she could wear it properly. The last day of the fall term was December 20th. Helena said goodbye to her students, many of whom cried and begged her not to leave. She promised to write to them and encourage them to continue their studies. Mrs. Patterson also cried, though she was happy for Helena. "You have found what every woman hopes for," she said, embracing Helena tightly. "A man who sees you and loves you for exactly who you are. Do not let him go." "I will not," Helena promised. On December 21st, Helena boarded the stage for Wyoming territory, her trunk packed with her books, her clothes, and her teaching supplies. Mrs. Patterson and several of the townspeople came to see her off, waving as the stage pulled away. The journey took 3 days through cold, sometimes snowy conditions. Helena spent the time alternating between excitement and nervousness. What if something had changed? What if Lucas had realized he could not really want a woman like her? What if she disappointed him somehow? But when the stage pulled into Cheyenne on December 24th, and she saw Lucas waiting on the platform, all her doubts vanished. He looked thinner than she remembered, as if he had been working too hard and eating too little. But his face lit up when he saw her, and he rushed forward to help her down from the stage. "Helena," he breathed, crushing her to him. "You are here. You are really here." "I am here," she confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am home." "Not quite yet," he said, pulling back to look at her. "But soon. First, we have an appointment at the church. The Reverend is waiting for us if you are still willing." "I am more than willing," she said. They were married that afternoon in a small church in Cheyenne, with Charlie Patterson and his new wife serving as witnesses. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when Lucas slipped his mother's ring onto Helena's finger, she felt a sense of rightness that settled deep in her bones. They spent their wedding night in a small but clean hotel in Cheyenne, and Helena discovered that the passion she had sensed in Lucas's letters translated beautifully to physical affection. He was gentle and patient with her, mindful of her inexperience, and by morning, she felt she understood him in a way that words alone could never have conveyed. The next day, they set out for the ranch. It was a day's ride by wagon, and Lucas had brought a well-sprung vehicle with warm blankets to keep Helena comfortable. As they drove, he pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the land and the people who lived there. The Double Bar J Ranch, where Lucas had worked for the past 8 years, came into view first. It was a sprawling operation with a large main house and numerous outbuildings. Lucas drove past it without stopping, continuing on for another mile until they came to a gentle rise overlooking a valley with a creek running through it. There, nestled against a stand of cottonwood trees, stood a small but well-built house. It was constructed of logs with a stone chimney and real glass windows. A barn stood nearby, and a corral held several horses. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thorne," Lucas said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Helena climbed down and simply stood, taking it all in. It was beautiful in its simplicity, solid and real and theirs. Lucas came to stand beside her, his arm around her waist. "Is it all right?" he asked, and she could hear the vulnerability in his voice. "It is perfect," she said honestly. "Show me inside." The interior of the house was a single large room with a sleeping loft above. A large iron stove dominated one corner, already radiating warmth. A table and chairs occupied the center of the space, and against one wall, exactly as Lucas had promised, was a bookshelf that stretched from floor to ceiling, waiting to be filled. "The bedroom is up in the loft," Lucas explained. "It is not much, but it is private, and there is room to add on. I thought maybe next summer we could build another room or two if needed." "If we are blessed with children," Helena said. "If we are blessed," Lucas agreed, pulling her close. "But either way, you and I together, that is enough. Everything else is just extra blessing." They spent the next few days settling in, arranging Helena's books on the shelves, setting up the small kitchen, making the house truly theirs. Charlie Patterson and his wife came to visit, bringing food and supplies as a wedding gift. Other neighbors stopped by as well, curious about the new schoolteacher Lucas had brought home. Helena learned quickly that life on a ranch was demanding. Lucas was up before dawn every day, tending to the horses and cattle, mending fences, hauling water, chopping wood. She threw herself into the work of keeping house, cooking meals and managing their small household. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way her teaching had never quite been. In late January, Lucas came home one evening with news. "I spoke to some of the ranchers today," he said. "There are at least a dozen families within riding distance who have children who need schooling. They are willing to pay a small fee if you would be willing to teach them." Helena's face lit up. "Really? You told them I was qualified?" "I told them you were the finest teacher in Colorado, and they would be lucky to have you," he said, grinning. "We could use the barn during the coldest months, and once spring comes, we can build a proper schoolhouse. Nothing fancy, but adequate." "Oh, Lucas," Helena said, throwing her arms around him. "You remembered." "I remember everything you have ever told me," he said simply. "Your dreams are my dreams now." The school opened in February with 8 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. It was a humble beginning, but Helena threw herself into it with all her passion and skill. The children were hungry for knowledge, and their parents were grateful for the opportunity. As winter gave way to spring, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas and Helena worked side by side, building their future together. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing their thoughts and dreams. They made love with increasing confidence and joy, learning each other's bodies as thoroughly as they had learned each other's minds. In April, Helena missed her monthly course. By May, she was certain she was with child. She waited until she was absolutely sure before telling Lucas, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. She chose a quiet evening when they were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the grasslands. "Lucas, I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. He turned to her, his expression immediately concerned. "What is it? Are you well?" "I am very well," she assured him. "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." His face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, joy, fear, and back to joy. "A baby, you are certain?" "As certain as I can be. I believe it will come in December, near our first anniversary." Lucas stood up and pulled her to her feet, spinning her around gently. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." He stopped suddenly. "Should I be spinning you? Is that safe?" Helena laughed. "I am pregnant, not fragile, but perhaps you should put me down anyway." He set her down carefully and immediately knelt, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your father, and I already love you more than I knew was possible." Tears filled Helena's eyes as she ran her fingers through his hair. This man who had seen her so clearly from the start, who had loved her not despite her strength but because of it, who had given her everything she had ever wanted without her having to diminish herself to receive it. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much." He stood and kissed her tenderly. "I love you, Helena. You and this child, you are everything to me." The pregnancy progressed normally, though Helena continued teaching through the summer, finally stopping in October when her belly made it difficult to move comfortably between the desks. Lucas was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her health and comfort. Helena found it both touching and occasionally irritating, but she understood it came from love. In early December, as the first real snow began to fall, Helena went into labor. Lucas rode like the wind to fetch Mrs. Patterson's cousin, who had recently moved to the area and had experience as a midwife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Lucas stayed by Helena's side the entire time, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. Finally, on December 10th, 1885, their son was born. He was healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs and a thick head of dark hair. Lucas cried when he held him for the first time, this tiny person they had created together. "What should we name him?" Helena asked, exhausted but happy. Lucas looked at his son, then at his wife. "I would like to name him James, after my grandfather, the only member of my family who ever showed me true kindness. James Lucas Thorne, if that suits you." "James Lucas Thorne," Helena repeated, smiling. "Hello, James. Welcome to the world." The first years of James's life were demanding, but joyful. Helena returned to teaching when he was 6 months old, bringing him with her to the schoolhouse and letting the older girls take turns watching him during lessons. Lucas built them a bigger house, this one with separate bedrooms and a proper kitchen. The school grew as more families moved into the area, drawn by the promise of education for their children. In the spring of 1888, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was more confident, knowing what to expect. Their daughter, Sarah Ann Thorne, was born in November of that year, an easier birth than her brother had been. She was a quiet, thoughtful baby where James had been loud and demanding, and Lucas doted on her shamelessly. The years passed quickly, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children and their community. The school that had started in their barn was now a proper building, funded by the territorial government and several generous local ranchers. Helena taught there 5 days a week, educating a new generation of Wyoming children. Lucas's ranch prospered as well. Through careful management and hard work, he had built up a respectable herd. He took on a couple of hired men to help with the work, young cowboys who reminded him of himself at that age. He paid them fairly and treated them with respect, earning their loyalty in return. In 1890, Wyoming became a state, one of the first to grant women the right to vote. Helena cast her ballot with tears of joy streaming down her face, Lucas standing proudly beside her. It was a moment she had dreamed of for years, and she wished every woman in every state could experience the same dignity. By 1892, James was 7 and Sarah was 4. They were bright, curious children, raised on books and horses in equal measure. James had his father's work ethic and his mother's love of learning. Sarah had her father's quiet intensity and her mother's passion for justice. Helena looked at them and saw the future she and Lucas were building, not just for themselves but for all the children they taught. One evening in late spring, after the children were asleep in their room, Helena and Lucas sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The grasslands stretched out before them, green and lush with new growth. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked suddenly. "Leaving Manassas, giving up your first school, taking a chance on a cowboy you had never met?" Helena took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Lucas. Not just the obvious things like this home and our children, though those are precious beyond words. You gave me yourself, fully and completely. You never asked me to be less than I am. You encouraged me to be more. You saw me, really saw me when no one else could. How could I possibly regret that?" Lucas raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I am the lucky one," he said. "I was a cowboy with nothing but a dream and a piece of land. You could have chosen someone with more to offer." "You had everything I needed to offer," Helena said. "Honesty, respect, partnership, love. What more could anyone want?" "Still," Lucas said, his eyes twinkling, "I did pretty well for a man who courted his wife with just a letter." Helena laughed. "Your words were enough," she said. "They showed me your heart, and your heart was everything I had been waiting for." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. In the distance, they could hear the cattle lowing softly and the horses moving in the corral. From inside the house came the sound of Sarah talking in her sleep and James's gentle snoring. "I want more children," Lucas said suddenly. "Is that selfish of me? We have two healthy, beautiful children. We are blessed, but I look at you, and I want to fill this house with the children we make together. I want a dozen little versions of you running around, challenging everything and making the world better." Helena smiled. "A dozen might be ambitious," she said. "But I would not be opposed to expanding our family. James is 7 now. Sarah is 4. Perhaps it is time." "Yeah?" Lucas asked, turning to look at her with such hope in his eyes that her heart melted all over again. "Yeah," she confirmed. Their third child, a son they named Daniel, was born in February of 1893. Their fourth, another daughter named Rebecca, arrived in 1895. With 4 children and a thriving school, their lives were full to overflowing. Helena had to reduce her teaching schedule, taking on an assistant teacher to help manage the growing student body. Lucas hired more help for the ranch, men he trained and trusted to do the work as well as he could himself. In 1898, James turned 13 and began working the ranch alongside his father. He had his father's build and his mother's quick mind, and Lucas could not have been prouder. Sarah, at 10, was already talking about becoming a teacher like her mother. Daniel, at 5, was the adventurous one, always getting into mischief and making them laugh. Rebecca, at 3, was the baby of the family, sweet-natured and affectionate. One Saturday morning in the summer of 1898, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Lucas went out to meet him, Helena following behind, curious about who would be visiting. The man was middle-aged, well-dressed, and riding a fine horse. "Are you Lucas Thorne?" he asked. "I am," Lucas said cautiously. "What can I do for you? My name is Robert Jameson. I am with the Territorial Education Board. I have been hearing remarkable things about the school your wife runs. I wanted to see it for myself and discuss a proposal with both of you." Helena stepped forward. "I am Helena Thorne. What sort of proposal?" "The territory, or rather the state now, is looking to establish a network of rural schools, particularly in areas that have been traditionally underserved. Your school has become something of a model for what we hope to accomplish. We would like to offer you a position as a regional supervisor, helping to establish and support schools throughout this part of Wyoming. The salary would be substantial, and you would have a real voice in shaping education policy for the state." Helena's eyes widened. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind of position she had only dreamed of, but she looked at Lucas, at their house, at the life they had built. "That would require travel, would it not?" Lucas asked, his voice neutral. "Some, yes," Mr. Jameson admitted. "Perhaps 1 week a month, visiting schools and meeting with teachers." Helena shook her head slowly. "It is a generous offer, Mr. Jameson, and I am honored, but my place is here. I have 4 children who need their mother. I have a school full of students who depend on me. I have a husband who I choose to be with every day. I cannot accept a position that would take me away from them, no matter how prestigious or well paid." Mr. Jameson looked disappointed but not surprised. "I understand, but would you be willing to serve as a consultant? We could correspond by mail, and I could come to you periodically to discuss policy and seek your advice. You have built something remarkable here, Mrs. Thorne, and I believe your insights could benefit the entire state." Helena looked at Lucas, who nodded his encouragement. "That I could do," she agreed. "I would be happy to help in whatever way I can as long as it does not take me from my family, After Mr. Jameson left, Lucas pulled Helena into his arms. "You could have taken that job," he said. "I would have supported you." "I know you would have," Helena said. "But I meant what I said. My place is here with you and our children. I can still make a difference, still influence education policy, but I will not sacrifice my family to do it. I have everything I want right here." Lucas kissed her forehead. "I love you, Helena Thorne." "Have I told you that today?" "Only twice," she teased. "But I never tire of hearing it." As the years continued to pass, the Thorne family became a fixture in the community. Lucas served on the town council and helped establish fair grazing rights for small ranchers. Helena's school produced students who went on to college, to professional careers, to lives their parents had never imagined possible. Their children grew strong and capable, each finding their own path in the world. James took over more and more of the ranch operations as Lucas got older, showing the same dedication and integrity his father had modeled. Sarah did indeed become a teacher, opening a school of her own in a neighboring county. Daniel, true to his adventurous nature, became a surveyor, mapping the wild spaces of Wyoming. Rebecca studied medicine, one of the first women doctors in the state. In 1910, on their 25th wedding anniversary, Lucas and Helena took a rare trip away from the ranch, leaving it in James's capable hands. They traveled back to Manassas, Colorado, to visit Mrs. Patterson, who was now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack. Walking through the streets of Manassas, Helena marveled at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The schoolhouse where she had taught was still there, though with a different teacher. The church where people had pitied her for being unmarried was still standing. "Do you remember standing at that stage stop, waiting for me?" Lucas asked as they walked past it. "I remember being terrified," Helena admitted. "I remember thinking you might take one look at me and realize you had made a terrible mistake." "I took one look at you and knew I had been right to write that letter," Lucas said. "I saw you standing there, trying so hard to be brave, and I thought, there she is. There is the woman I am going to love for the rest of my life." "Your words were enough," Helena said, repeating what she had told him years ago. "In that first letter you saw me, you understood me. You did not want me to be anyone other than who I was. That was all I ever needed." "I still see you," Lucas said, stopping to face her. "I see the girl who was brave enough to say yes to a stranger's letter. I see the woman who built a life with me in the wilderness. I see the mother who raised 4 extraordinary children. I see the teacher who changed countless lives. I see the partner who has stood beside me through every joy and every hardship, and I love every version of you, every moment of every day." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," Lucas agreed, "and it is not over yet. We have grandchildren to spoil, students to teach, work to do, and years ahead of us. I am not done loving you yet, Helena, not by a long shot." They returned to Wyoming with renewed appreciation for the life they had built. The ranch continued to prosper, now expanded to include James's family, as he had married a local girl and had 3 children of their own. The house Lucas had built all those years ago had been added onto multiple times, until it was a sprawling, comfortable home filled with love and laughter. In the spring of 1915, Helena was teaching when she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She managed to dismiss the students and make it to a chair before the world went dark. One of the older boys ran for help, and within minutes, Lucas was there, cradling her in his arms. "Helena, stay with me," he begged, his voice breaking. "Please stay with me." She opened her eyes and managed a small smile. "I am not going anywhere," she said weakly. "Just my heart reminding me I am not as young as I used to be." The doctor, who happened to be their daughter Rebecca, examined her thoroughly and pronounced it a mild heart episode. She ordered complete rest for at least a month, no teaching, no exertion. Helena chafed at the restrictions, but Lucas enforced them rigorously, enlisting the children's help to ensure their mother behaved herself. During those weeks of forced rest, Helena and Lucas spent hours talking, remembering their life together. They pulled out the letters they had written to each other during their courtship, yellowed and fragile now, and read them aloud, marveling at how young they had been, how nervous and hopeful. "You remember writing this?" Lucas asked, holding up one of her early letters. "You told me you were afraid of living a half-life, surrounded by people who wished you were someone else." "I remember," Helena said. "I was so lonely in Manasseh. I felt like I did not fit anywhere, like there was something wrong with me for wanting more than what was offered." "And now?" Lucas asked. "Now I know there was nothing wrong with me," Helena said. "I just needed to find someone who was brave enough to see me and strong enough to stand beside me. I needed you." "We needed each other," Lucas corrected. "I was just a cowboy with a dream before you. You made me want to be better, to build something that mattered. You gave me purpose beyond just surviving." Helena recovered from her heart episode, though she never quite regained her former energy. She retired from full-time teaching, though she still tutored students occasionally and remained active as a consultant on education policy. Lucas, now in his 50s, handed over most of the ranch operations to James, though he still rode out most days to check on things and offer advice. They grew old together, watching their grandchildren grow up, celebrating the successes of their children, and mourning the losses that inevitably came with age. Mrs. Patterson passed away in 1916, and they made the trip to Colorado for her funeral, grateful for the role she had played in bringing them together. Charlie Patterson, Lucas's old friend, followed his aunt 2 years later. In 1920, women across the entire United States gained the right to vote. Helena, now 60 years old, celebrated with tears of joy. She thought of all the young women she had taught over the years, all the girls who would grow up knowing they had a voice in their government. She thought of Sarah and Rebecca and her granddaughters, and she felt proud of the world they were inheriting. Lucas, at 62, was still strong and capable, though his hair was completely gray now and his hands were gnarled with arthritis. He still woke before dawn most days, still checked on the cattle and horses, still came home to Helena every evening with stories about his day. One evening in late summer of 1922, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The sun was setting over the grasslands, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Their grandchildren were running around the yard, playing some complicated game of their own invention. James and his wife were in the barn, finishing up the evening chores. Sarah had come to visit with her family, and the house was full of noise and laughter. "I have been thinking," Lucas said, reaching for Helena's hand. "Always dangerous," she teased, though she squeezed his hand gently. "I have been thinking about that first letter I wrote to you," he continued. "About how terrified I was to send it, how sure I was that you would think I was foolish or presumptuous." "I thought you were brave," Helena said, "honest and brave and real." "I wrote in that letter that I was looking for someone who would make me better," Lucas said. "You have done that and so much more. You made me the man I wanted to be. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You gave me children and grandchildren, purpose and meaning, love and partnership. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Helena said, her voice thick with emotion. "That first letter, those words you wrote, they showed me your heart, and your heart was everything I had been searching for. You are right that I have made you better, Lucas, but you have done the same for me." You saw me when no one else could. You loved me when no one else would. You gave me a life of purpose and meaning, of love and respect. We built this together." "We did," Lucas agreed. "And I would do it all again exactly the same way. Every moment, every hardship, every joy. All of it was worth it because it led me to you and through life with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the stars began to appear. The sounds of their family surrounded them, the legacy of their love made manifest in these children and grandchildren who would carry on after they were gone. Helena thought about that lonely schoolteacher in Manasseh, the woman no one wanted to court, the woman who had almost given up on finding someone who could love her as she was. She thought about the single letter that had changed everything, the cowboy who had seen her clearly from hundreds of miles away and had been brave enough to reach out. "Your words were enough," she whispered, repeating the phrase that had become their private motto over the years. "Your words showed me your heart, and your heart was everything." Lucas raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, as he had done countless times over their nearly 40 years of marriage. "And your heart has been everything to me," he replied. "My partner, my love, my life. Everything." They sat together as the stars wheeled overhead, surrounded by the life they had built, grateful for the letter that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through all the years. It was a good life, Helena thought. A very good life indeed. The years continued on, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. They welcomed more great-grandchildren into the family, tiny people who would never know a world where their great-grandmother had not had the right to vote, or where women were not teachers and doctors and surveyors. Helena and Lucas watched the world change, sometimes slowly and sometimes quickly, and they were grateful to have witnessed so much progress. In the winter of 1925, Lucas caught pneumonia. At 67, his body did not fight it off as easily as it might have when he was younger. For 2 weeks he lay in bed, fevered and weak, while Helena sat beside him, reading to him and cooling his forehead with damp cloths. Rebecca came to help, bringing all her medical knowledge to bear, but they all knew it was in God's hands now. Lucas recovered, but he was never quite the same after that. He moved more slowly, tired more easily. He finally agreed to let James handle all the ranch operations, contenting himself with sitting on the porch and watching the work being done. Helena, now 65, was showing her own age. Her heart had given her occasional trouble since that first episode 10 years ago, and she spent most of her days quietly, reading or knitting or playing with her great-grandchildren. But they had each other, and that was enough. They still sat together every evening, still held hands, still found things to talk about after all these years. Sometimes they talked about the past, remembering their courtship and the early years of their marriage. Sometimes they talked about the present, discussing their children and grandchildren and the state of the world. And sometimes they talked about the future, about what would happen when one of them was gone. "Promise me something," Helena said one evening in the spring of 1926. "When I am gone, do not mourn me too long. Live whatever time you have left fully. Be with our children and grandchildren. Find joy where you can." "I could say the same to you," Lucas replied. "If I go first, I do not want you sitting in this house grieving. I want you to live, Helena. Really live, for as long as you can." "We have both lived remarkable lives," Helena said. "We have loved and been loved. We have raised good children who are raising good children. We have made a difference in our community and in the world. When the time comes for either of us to go, we can go knowing we did it right." "We did do it right, did we not?" Lucas said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Against all odds, we found each other and built something beautiful." "We did," Helena agreed. And it all started with one letter, with your words showing me your heart. My words were enough, Lucas said softly. Your words were everything, Helena corrected. They were the beginning of this life, this beautiful life we have shared. They lived on together for several more years, each day a gift they did not take for granted. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in December of 1934, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. It was a grand celebration, with people coming from all over Wyoming to honor the couple who had become legends in their community. The schoolteacher and the cowboy who had courted by letter and built an empire of love and learning together. Helena died peacefully in her sleep on a cold January night in 1935, at the age of 75. She went to bed with Lucas beside her, as she had nearly every night for 50 years, and simply did not wake up. Lucas held her hand and wept, grateful that she had not suffered, devastated that she was gone. He lived for 2 more years after that, though everyone who knew him said he was never quite the same without Helena. He spent his days sitting in the library she had loved, surrounded by the books they had collected together, reading her letters from their courtship and remembering their life together. He told stories about her to his great-grandchildren, making sure they knew what a remarkable woman she had been. Lucas Thorne died in the spring of 1937 at the age of 79, sitting in his chair with one of Helena's letters in his hand. James found him there, a peaceful smile on his face, and knew that his father had gone to be with his mother, where he had always belonged. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery outside Cheyenne, their graves marked by a simple stone that read, Lucas Thorne, 1858–1937, Helena Jacobson Thorne, 1860–1935. His words were enough. Her love was everything, together forever. The school Helena had founded continued to operate for many more decades, eventually becoming part of the state school system. The ranch Lucas had built remained in the Thorne family, passed down through the generations. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren scattered across Wyoming and beyond, carrying with them the legacy of 2 people who had been brave enough to reach across distance and uncertainty to find each other. And in archives and attic boxes, saved carefully through the years, were the letters they had written to each other during their courtship. Letters full of honesty and hope, of dreams and fears, of 2 souls reaching out and finding exactly what they needed in each other. Letters that proved that sometimes words are enough. Sometimes the right words at the right time can change everything. Sometimes one letter from a cowboy to a schoolteacher nobody wanted to court is all it takes to build a love that lasts forever. Their story became part of the folklore of Wyoming, told and retold over the years. The schoolteacher who was too educated, too opinionated, too difficult to love. The cowboy who saw her clearly from hundreds of miles away and was brave enough to write one letter. The love they built together, against all odds, based on respect and partnership and honest words. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West of the 1880s, built on hard work and determination, sustained by mutual respect and genuine affection. It was proof that true love does not require perfection or ease, but rather courage, honesty, and the willingness to truly see another person and be seen in return. And it all started with one letter, with a cowboy's careful words, with a schoolteacher's brave response, with 2 people deciding to take a chance on something neither had ever experienced before. That letter, those words, they were enough to start something beautiful. They were enough to change 2 lives forever. They were enough to create a legacy that would endure long after both lovers were gone. In the end, that is what love is. Not grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but honest words, genuine respect, and the courage to build a life together one day at a time. Lucas and Helena understood that from the very beginning, and they lived that truth every single day of their 50 years together. Their love was not perfect, but it was real and true and lasting. And that truly was enough.